When people think about power in the past, they often imagine a single figure at the top, a king whose word was law, a ruler whose authority went unquestioned. That image doesn't travel well across pre-colonial Africa. In many African societies, power was not something one person owned. It was something negotiated, shared, and maintained. Rulers existed, authority mattered, but leadership came with limits. Decisions were shaped by councils, customs, and expectations that extended far beyond the throne. A king who ignored those limits did not simply rule poorly, he risked losing legitimacy altogether. Most people were never taught this. They were taught to look for crowns, not constraints, titles, not relationships. In this episode, we're not cataloging rulers. We're examining how power actually functioned, how authority was granted, challenged, and sustained in societies that understood leadership as a responsibility, not an entitlement. Before looking at specific societies, it helps to reset what we mean by government. In much of the modern world, governance is tied to written constitutions, formal offices, and centralized institutions. Pre-colonial African societies organized authority differently, but not loosely or casually. Power was embedded in daily life. It lived in customs people followed, rituals people respected, and expectations people enforced together. Law was often remembered rather than written, but it was no less binding or serious. Authority came from legitimacy, not simply force. Leaders ruled because communities recognized their role, not because coercion alone made them untouchable. That recognition could be reinforced, negotiated, or withdrawn when expectations were violated. In many societies, councils of elders, religious figures, or lineage heads advised leaders and constrained their decisions. These councils did not exist as decoration. They served as mechanisms of accountability, balancing continuity with adaptation during change. Governance was also local. Decisions affecting daily life were often handled at the community level, where social pressure, reputation, and memory mattered deeply. This reduced the need for constant enforcement from above. None of this means systems were identical across the continent. They were not. But a shared principle appears again and again. Power worked best when it was distributed, negotiated, and understood as conditional. With that frame in place, we can begin to see governance not as absence, but as a different logic shaped by environment, history, and lived experience. It functioned through shared expectations, collective memory, and social participation, allowing communities to regulate power without centralized bureaucracy, across generations and changing circumstances. In parts of West Africa, kingship existed within clear boundaries. Rulers held authority, but they did not govern alone. Councils played a central role in advising leaders, interpreting custom, and maintaining balance between power and responsibility. In some societies, these councils could openly challenge a ruler's decisions without threatening the stability of the wider system. Leadership depended on performance as much as lineage. A ruler who failed to uphold custom, protect the community, or govern responsibly risked losing legitimacy in the eyes of elders, spiritual authorities, and ordinary people. In extreme cases, removal was not unthinkable, because authority was understood as conditional rather than permanent. This system created incentives. Leaders had to listen. They had to negotiate. They had to govern in ways that preserved social harmony, public trust, and continuity, rather than personal dominance or unchecked ambition. Religion and belief reinforced these limits. Spiritual authority often stood alongside political authority, creating an additional layer of accountability. Power was not only political, it was moral, symbolic, and tied to shared understandings of order and responsibility. What matters here is not the name of any single kingdom, but the pattern that appears repeatedly. Authority flowed through relationships between ruler and council, leader and community, belief and obligation, binding power to collective expectation. These systems did not eliminate conflict, but they channeled it. They provided structured ways to correct imbalance, restrain excess, and restore legitimacy without collapsing the entire social and political order. They also allowed communities to adapt over time, preserving stability while absorbing change without relying on constant coercion, violence, or centralized control alone, ever. In Central Africa, governance often extended across wide territories that included different communities, languages, and local customs. Authority was delegated rather than concentrated. Local leaders managed provinces or districts, maintaining order while remaining connected to central leadership. This structure allowed power to scale across distance without becoming rigid or detached from everyday life. Diplomacy mattered deeply. Relationships between regions were maintained through negotiation, tribute, alliance, and careful communication. Marriage ties reinforced political bonds. Trade agreements strengthened cooperation. Stability emerged through connection rather than domination or constant force. These arrangements required administration. Messengers carried decisions between regions. Officials enforced norms and resolved disputes. Authority traveled, but it did not erase local governance. Instead, it worked alongside it, balancing central coordination with local responsibility. What stands out is how adaptable these systems were. Governance adjusted to geography, population density, and changing conditions. Power was not imposed uniformly across territory. It was shaped to fit reality on the ground and the needs of the people living there. This flexibility allowed societies to absorb change without losing cohesion. Leadership could respond to shifting circumstances without dismantling existing structures. Authority was exercised through relationship management rather than strict command. Governance, in this context, functioned as a network. Each level depended on the others. Central authority relied on local leaders, and local leaders depended on broader legitimacy. The system worked because responsibility was shared. This approach reduced fragmentation, it encouraged cooperation, and it allowed political systems to endure across generations without constant collapse, rebellion, or violent restructuring over long periods of time. Across regions, climates, and cultures, a shared logic emerges. Power was constrained. Authority was conditional. Governance relied on participation. Leaders ruled with others, not above them. Councils, customs, and belief systems limited excess and reinforced responsibility. When power drifted too far from shared expectations, correction followed through established norms rather than constant force. This did not make societies weak, it made them resilient. Systems that distribute authority are better equipped to adapt to change. They bend rather than break under pressure. They survive leadership transitions because legitimacy does not rest on one individual alone, but on shared agreement and continuity. These patterns mattered because they shaped everything else. Trade depended on trust. Law depended on memory and consensus. Conflict resolution depended on mediation rather than total domination. Power was not an abstract concept removed from daily life. It was lived, negotiated, and reinforced through ordinary interactions between people who relied on one another. Because authority was embedded in society, governance adjusted as conditions shifted. Leaders could be corrected without dismantling entire systems. Communities could absorb disruption without losing coherence. Stability emerged not from rigidity, but from balance. Understanding this helps explain how complex societies functioned without modern bureaucracies.
It also explains why many of these systems endured for centuries, adapting to internal change while maintaining continuity. What we see across Africa before colonization is not the absence of order, but a different model of it, one built on participation, restraint, and shared responsibility. That model shaped how people lived, traded, governed, and resolved conflict long before external forces introduced new pressures.
By now, one thing should be clear. Power in Africa before colonization was not accidental. It was organized, limited, and deeply social. But authority did not exist in isolation. It followed movement, it followed exchange, it followed trade. To understand where these systems were strongest and why they endured, we have to follow what moved between them. That journey leads us outward, across deserts, along rivers, and toward routes that connected Africa to the world. What we see across Africa before colonization is not the absence of order, but a different model of it, one built on participation, restraint, and shared responsibility. That model shaped how people lived, traded, governed, and resolved conflict long before external forces introduced new pressures.